You know, when you think about military medals, you usually think about absolute clarity. You do something heroic, the military notices, and they give you the medal you deserve. Clean, simple, fair. But the reality inside the ranks is often messy, political, and, frankly, deeply unfair. Take the story of Monica. She wasn't some high-ranking officer sitting in a comfortable air-conditioned tent. She was a combat medic deployed to a dusty, volatile outpost in Helmand Province. Monica was the kind of person who kept her head down, did her job, and earned the respect of every grunt on the line because they knew if things went sideways, she'd be the one running into the fire to drag them out. And that's exactly what happened on a suffocatingly hot Tuesday afternoon when her platoon got ambushed. The firefight was chaotic, a wall of leads snapping through the air, RPGs shaking the ground, and suddenly the radio screamed with the words every medic dreads, "Man down." Without a second thought, Monica grabbed her aid bag and dove into the open, completely exposed to enemy fire, working on pure adrenaline to patch up a critically wounded infantryman while bullets kicked up dirt inches from her face. She single-handedly kept him alive under a hail of gunfire, a textbook definition of valor. But while Monica was literally bleeding for her people in the dirt, back at the main base, a few miles away from the chaos, her unit's leadership was busy doing something entirely different. They weren't tracking the battle, they weren't coordinating air support, they were actually hosting a battalion bowling tournament. What happens next? Tell me where you want the story to go, and I'll keep it rolling. While Monica was dragging 70 pounds of gear and a bleeding soldier through the gravel, breathing in gunpowder and red dust, the officers back at the forward operating base were literally keeping score on a whiteboard next to a makeshift bowling lane. It sounds like a bad movie, but that's the reality of a bloated bureaucracy in a combat zone. The command staff had organized this morale-boosting day, and they were so detached from the grid coordinates where Monica's platoon was currently fighting for their lives that they didn't even pause the tournament when the casualty reports started trickling in. Monica spent 45 minutes in that kill zone, completely exposed, holding her hand over a severed artery, using her own body as a shield to keep the dust out of an open chest wound until the medevac chopper finally cleared the ridgeline. By the time she got back to the base, her uniform was stiff with dried blood, her hands were still shaking from the adrenaline, and she walked right past the recreation tent where she could hear the pins crashing and guys laughing. Her platoon sergeant, furious about how close they'd come to losing everyone, immediately sat down and started typing up a recommendation for the Silver Star, the nation's third highest award for valor. He detailed how Monica had ignored direct orders to stay behind cover, how she'd put herself between the enemy and the casualty, and how her quick thinking was the sole reason that soldier was going to make it home to his family. What happens when the paperwork hits the desk of those officers who were bowling? Give me the next piece. When that Silver Star paperwork finally landed on the battalion commander's desk, it sat there for 3 weeks under a stack of logistical reports and requisition forms. See, the officers who were running that bowling tournament weren't just indifferent, they were protective of their own narrative. To approve a Silver Star for a lower enlisted female medic meant acknowledging that a massive, catastrophic security failure had happened right under their noses while they were busy striking pins and drinking lukewarm sodas. If a private first class gets the nation's third highest medal for a massive firefight, the Pentagon starts asking questions about why leadership didn't see the ambush coming. So, the bureaucracy did what it does best. It started chipping away at Monica's story. They downgraded the Silver Star to a Bronze Star with a V device, claiming that while her actions were brave, they didn't meet the extreme threshold required for a Silver Star. But the real kick in the teeth came a month later at the battalion award ceremony. Monica stood there in her dress uniform, her heart sinking as she watched the very officers who were bowling that day get called up to the stage ahead of her. They weren't getting Bronze Stars for valor. They were receiving Bronze Stars and Meritorious Service Medals for exceptional leadership and theater management, medals that looked almost identical to Monica's on paper, but carried higher weight for future promotions. The guy who had actually won the bowling tournament got a medal for maintaining unit morale under austere conditions, while Monica was handed a piece of bronze for literally taking a bullet for her country. Where do we take Monica's journey from here? Let me know the next twist. The contrast on that stage was sickening. You had Monica, who still had nightmares about the smell of burning copper and dust, standing next to a captain who got a bronze medal for making sure the Wi-Fi in the rec tent didn't go down during the tournament finals. The grunts in the audience knew exactly what was happening. You could feel the tension in the room, this thick, heavy silence, as the brass patted each other on the back for outstanding operational oversight. Monica just stared straight ahead, holding that bronze star with the V in her palm, realizing that in the eyes of the military machine, a perfectly executed strike on a bowling lane counted just as much, if not more, than saving a human life in a ditch. After the ceremony, the disconnect only grew wider. The officers went back to their air-conditioned offices to update their resumes for the next promotion board, using those inflated medals to guarantee their climb up the career ladder. Meanwhile, Monica went back to the barracks, threw her medal into the bottom of a footlocker under a pile of dirty socks, and tried to figure out how to stop her hands from trembling every time a truck backfired. She didn't want the spotlight, but watching the people who were completely MIA during the worst day of her life get celebrated as heroes did something toxic to her spirit. It broke that unwritten contract of the military. The idea that if you bleed for them, they'll at least respect your sacrifice. How does this start catching up with the command, or what does Monica do next? Give me the next beat. Word of what happened on that stage didn't stay confined to the barracks for long. The grunts who were actually out there in the dirt with Monica started talking, and the story of the bowling alley bronze stars began spreading like wildfire through the whispers of the enlisted ranks. It became this symbol of everything wrong with the system, the massive gap between the people who fight the wars and the people who manage them from the safety of an air-conditioned tent. Monica tried to just focus on her job, but the injustice of it was like a slow-burning fuse. Every time she saw one of those officers walking around the base with their shiny new ribbons pinned to their chests, she was reminded that her near-death experience had been minimized just to keep their records clean. The infantryman she had saved, a guy named Jackson, was flown back to the States for rehabilitation. And when he finally woke up and found out that the woman who literally kept his blood inside his body was passed over for the Silver Star while the guys who were bowling got promoted, he was furious. He didn't care about army politics or protecting the battalion's reputation. From his hospital bed in Texas, Jackson picked up his phone and called a journalist he knew, determined to make sure the world found out exactly what happened in that Hellman ditch, and exactly what the leadership was doing while Monica was bleeding. Drop the final hint, and let's bring this home for the ending. By the time that journalist's article hit the internet, the story exploded. It didn't just spark a conversation, it ripped the lid right off the battalion's cozy little setup. The phrase "bowling alley bronze stars" became a trending topic, and suddenly, the Pentagon couldn't ignore the public outrage anymore. A congressional inquiry was launched, and those same officers who had been smugly planning their next promotions found themselves sitting under intense, blinding lights, answering uncomfortable questions about where exactly they were when Monica's platoon was taking fire. The military was forced to do a full administrative review of the awards, and while they couldn't completely undo the damage, the immense pressure eventually forced them to upgrade Monica's medal to the Silver Star she had rightfully earned from day one. But if you ask Monica today, she'll tell you the medal isn't what matters. She doesn't keep it on a shelf, and she doesn't wear it to ceremonies. For her, the real reward happened a few months ago when Jackson, walking on a new prosthetic leg, showed up at her doorstep just to give her a hug and introduce her to his newborn daughter. That's the thing about the Bronze Star with a V device, or any medal for real valor. The bureaucracy might try to downgrade it, minimize it, or mix it up with ribbons given for office work and recreation. But the people who were actually in the dirt know the truth. You can buy a shiny piece of metal with politics, but you can never buy the absolute, undeniable respect of the soldiers whose lives you saved. So next time you see someone walking around in a military uniform with a chest full of ribbons, don't just look at the size of the medals. Look for that tiny, unassuming medal letter V. Because in a system where bureaucratic gatekeepers can hand out bronze stars for organizing sports tournaments or managing spreadsheets, that little V is the only thing that can't be faked. It's the line in the sand between the people who manage the war and the heroes who actually fight it. Monica's story isn't just about a flawed award system. It's a reminder that true valor doesn't belong to the brass writing the reports in the air conditioning. It belongs to the grunts bleeding in the dirt. And at the end of the day, no amount of military politics can ever outshine the quiet, unbreakable bond of a soldier who looked death in the face just to make sure their brother or sister made it back home.